Well, this tip came in by email, and this person is asking, would you do a quick tip on creating our own color wheel using tube colors on your palette? Where would you place a pure tube color, or how would you mix colors to arrive at a hue around the wheel? This would be a really, really good way to show you how to identify your tube colors. Well, it's one thing to just identify tube colors, but to know how they relate to each other on the color wheel is really where we need to be as painters. I talk a lot about color lately, and I've really talked a lot about what color does to color. But color behaves the way it does because of the way those colors are arranged and how they affect each other. So I'm going to make this a two-part tip. I'll use the first part, today's tip, to show the warm colors, how we play with the warm colors, and not just as they go around the wheel, but your tube colors where they belong as they go towards neutral on the wheel. And then the next tip, which will be quick tip 523, we will place the cool colors. All right, I've done a little diagram here to help you get set with that, because it's no good really just to, it will be beneficial if you mix colors and make your own color wheel, but to be able to plot those colors that come out of your tubes according to where they would fit on the wheel, not only in the circle, but across on the wheel. I've come up here with a little diagram to help us to do that. I let the computer do this, and I've found that when we're doing the desaturation of colors, or when we're trying to identify the degree of saturation or desaturation of a color out of the tube, it's difficult to really pinpoint that, to communicate that to you. And so what I've found that you really can't do 10%, 20%, that sort of thing, because color mixed into color in pigments just don't behave that way. So the closest thing I could come to a consistent desaturation would be to call the most saturated area of the wheel, which is what we all see in the color wheels we buy. That will be, we'll call it 100 or full saturation. I really like using words rather than numbers because that gives us a little bit more flexibility. A number sort of indicates or suggests that it's got to be exactly that, and that's not the way color works. So I'd rather call that full saturation, or as close to full saturation as we can be. And then I found that about 70% of desaturation is where we can really visually identify the next difference in saturation, according to the computer. And then I found 40% would have been identified the next level of where we can really identify desaturation. So actually we can call that half. So we could call the one that where we just begin to see desaturation, we could call that partial. And then we could call the next degree half. And then that degree of desaturation where we can barely identify the hue in the tube color, we'll call that slightly. So I'm going to go in two directions here. We're going to go around the wheel and we're going to go across the wheel. Now, I have already narrowed my palette down over the years to just these colors. Mostly these are all the colors I use in all the painting I do most of the time. Sometimes I might need a highly desaturated color that's not a highly saturated color that's not on my palette, and I'll reach for another tube, but this is what I've narrowed mine down to. I always start, I have my palette arranged according to the wheel. And so the first color I always start with is yellow. Now, white does not belong on the wheel. White is not a color. White is a neutral that enables us to lighten colors. Black does not belong on the wheel. Black is not a color. There are some blacks do lean a little bit in one direction towards hue or another direction, but black itself is a full desaturation of dark. So it doesn't belong on the wheel. This neutral that we have indicated here is not black or white. It is simply mixtures, the mixtures of these complements, how they can neutralize each other. That's where the neutral belongs. So now what I've done here is to create something I hope makes sense, something readable for you. With just 4 bands, the outer band here represents the full saturation. So that's what we're accustomed to seeing on our wheel. The next band, of course, then is that next degree of desaturation, which we'll call partial or whatever other word comes out of my mouth. And then the third band here represents what I'm calling half or about 40%. It's kind of halfway between fully saturated and neutral. And then the smaller band here represents slightly saturated. We can see just very little hue in it. One thing very, very important, we can diagram on a wheel the hues as they are arranged in relationship to each other. And we can also diagram on the wheel how they neutralize each other. We cannot diagram on a wheel the values. And tube colors come in various values. So don't let the value differences of these colors throw you off. Let's look totally at hue. And the question we ask is how much hue is present. So we're going to use just the warm colors going from my yellow all the way over to my red violet. This area right here. This is what we will identify of my tube colors in this tip. And then we'll take the other side of the wheel in the next tip. So my first color here is yellow. Now I use the Utrecht Hansa Yellow Light. And I'll show you now how that looks. And here's what we'll do with that yellow. I'm using a stiff, flat brush to plot these. It makes it easier. So I'm going to plot the hue itself as it registers according to how it registers on the wheel. I'm going to plot it right on top of my line and maybe go over just a little bit on either side like that. That is as close to pure yellow as the human eye can register. Cadmium yellow light does the same thing. And what we have to watch for, I've talked about variations in tube names an awful lot, that different companies will have different variations of the Hansa, for example. So Hansa yellow light in the Gamblin colors is lighter and cooler than this. So the Hansa yellow medium in the Gamblin colors comes closer to being this color. Cadmium yellow light, not cadmium yellow pale. Cadmium yellow light is very close to just that, what we call spectrum yellow. That's the yellow that doesn't lean towards orange or doesn't lean towards green. And so so I don't have to mix anything there because I have that pure yellow as it comes out of the tube. Now the next color going around the wheel is yellow orange. Now yellow orange is a member of 6 colors on the wheel that can vary in hue. So the tertiary colors, yellow orange, red violet, blue green, and yellow green, those that have 2 names to them, they are transitions between the primaries and secondaries. A primary, as registers a hue, can't really change. If it changes, it's going to change towards a tertiary. It's going to lean towards a secondary and become a tertiary before we actually see secondary. That's the way color behaves when color is split. White light is split through a prism. Very, very tiny little observations there will show how color behaves. All right, so yellow orange. I do have yellow orange that registers is called cadmium yellow deep, but it's yellow orange. And so you see it registers pretty close to the yellow on the color wheel. So I'll place it right here. Now that's tertiary, but remember that that's not the only yellow orange. We have yellow orange that leans, let me put that in that full little slot there. There we go. And we have yellow orange that leans towards yellow, and we have yellow orange that leans towards orange. So kind of visualize this as a gradation that goes from yellow orange to yellow. And that way you give yourself a lot more latitude when you're working. The next color on the wheel is orange, but I don't keep an orange on my color wheel, on my palette. And the reason I don't is because I have colors that I can mix and get orange. So I'm going to skip the orange right here, and then I'll show you, and this is part of what the request was about. How do you mix? She didn't say it this way, but I gather she meant how do you mix the colors that you don't have that register on the wheel. And so the next thing I have around the wheel that is fully saturated is a red orange. And that is, let me pull these out of the way as I'm using them. That is cadmium red light. And I like the Gamlen cadmium red light, but cadmium red light registers pretty close to a red orange with most brands. So that's red orange, and that belongs right here. Now, it's not the only red orange I have, and this is where the fun comes in. So I've got two things I need to do here. One, to place it on the wheel, I need a mixture that is orange, that sits between, that is registering as orange, not yellow orange and not red orange. So to do that, what will I do? I can mix these two together, or I can mix yellow and red. I can mix this spectrum yellow and this spectrum red orange. Spectrum means as close to the hue as a color can get. Oh, that's my definition. It's pretty close too. So what I'll do here is I'll bring out the yellow orange, the cadmium yellow deep, yellow orange, and gradually add a little bit of the red orange to it to get the orange that would go on the color wheel. So that's the first thing we'll do. And the way I will do that is I will allow the color wheel to guide me. So you see it's still leaning towards yellow orange. And so that means it needs a little bit more to keep it placed, keep it consistent, let's say. It needs just a little bit more red in it to become a true orange. Now you can get cadmium orange, and there are other tube colors. There might be one called spectrum orange. A lot of times the companies will try to aim towards the exact hue and create a color. That's going to do it, I think. Create a color that will register exactly where it's supposed to. They'll call it spectrum, whatever. The one way that you can do this is not just to compare it on the wheel, because you'll find that some wheels will vary a little bit, but it's simply eyeball it. And what we want is a smooth, we want the orange to sit right between this yellow orange and red orange visually. We have to train ourselves to see things visually, to see variations and see differences in things visually. So let's see if I've done that. All right, this is my orange. It may lean a little bit more towards yellow orange. Now I put that down. Can you see that? It seems to lean a little bit more, taking a little bit more of the yellow orange. So if I really want that to register as orange, that I can read and use as a functional color wheel, I might be adding a little bit too much there. Let's see. Let's try this one. That may do it. Let's see. There it is. So that's closer. Now, I said I had two things to do here. To identify where my tube colors I use fall on the wheel, I have a red orange that I haven't plotted yet. Now this is where the fun comes, because you probably have a lot of tubes. If you've been painting in oil for a while, you probably have a lot of tubes that don't really register on the outside because they are desaturated. My Rembrandt Transparent Oxide Red is just a workhorse for me. It's a red-orange, but it's desaturated. Now, I can find out, this is a wonderful little way to find out about your colors, is to use the little test strips. But I can find out what hue it is if I just place a little bit of that color, and not as dark as I see it. So I need to get it as transparent so I can lay it on there and pretty much see the hue. You see there? Now what I can do is to hold this over here and see where it registers. Now see, it's more akin to red orange, maybe it leans slightly towards red, and it really is desaturated. It's a little bit more desaturated than what we would call partial. It's almost half desaturated. So on my wheel, if I'm plotting my tube colors on my wheel, this one would plot in this range right here. So this says this is red-orange, but it's a desaturated red-orange, so it goes right here. Now here the value, because it comes out of the tube dark, the value might throw you. Remember, we're looking for hue and saturation. When we're doing this kind of exercise, we're not looking for value. So don't let the value fool you. And mixing white will not give you a true test, because when you mix white into a color, it generally pulls some light out of the color. And that brings me now to go backwards just a little bit. Another color I have on my palette that I've just begun to experiment with and use is Indian Yellow. Indian Yellow has a strange characteristic. It appears to be very dark out of the tube, and when we place it on the, I'm going to do this on a test strip first of all. On a test strip and place it thinly, you see it's very transparent. It looks more orange. It looks more yellow-orange that leans towards orange. Can you see that? It's not quite fully orange. So as it comes out of the tube, it really registers as a yellow-orange, but it comes out of the tube in such a way that it appears to be darker in value, but we shouldn't let the value throw us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it right here. It's very slightly desaturated. So I'm going to place it right here and let it lean just a little bit more towards the orange, because it's yellow-orange, slightly desaturated, but leaning just a little bit. It's still a tertiary color. It's still yellow-orange. You see, when you get to know your tubes like that, and once you have all your tubes placed on the wheel, you'll be surprised that you'll be able to look at your own wheel and find decisions, ways to make decisions about color. There is another color, well, two other colors I will talk about. Most likely you have in your arsenal burnt umber and burnt sienna. Burnt umber is a red-orange that belongs right here. It's almost neutral. Burnt sienna is a red-orange that belongs about right here, about where I've placed my red-orange, my transparent oxide red. The difference is burnt sienna is opaque. Transparent oxide red is similar hue, and some brands of the burnt sienna will be very, very much almost identical to the transparent oxide red, except that those will be those will fall right here, but they are opaque is what I'm trying to say. So if you have those colors, that's where you would register those. And you can test it. You can test the burnt umber by going to a red-orange and adding to the red-orange a blue-green until you will get a burnt umber or a burnt sienna, depending. So the other color I had on my palette for a long time and found I was no longer using it is one that Richard Schmid had on his palette, which is the Yellow Ochre Light. Now, I don't have it here now. I did have it right there where the Indian yellow is. Pull this off. But I don't have it there now, but I'll show you. It is yellow ochre, but you see it's lighter than a regular yellow ochre. And it really belongs right in here in the yellow orange. But with white mixed into it, it becomes very, very light, a very, very light yellow orange. And desaturated belongs about right in here in the saturation. So just want to guide you a little bit on the colors that you might have. You may have the yellow ochre in your arsenal, but that's where it would belong. It would belong in the yellow orange right in here, but it would belong in the desaturated version about right here. Raw umber is another one, very desaturated. Some companies of raw umber are yellow, orange, but they belong right here. Very, 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 very desaturated, almost neutral. They would belong right there. Other companies will have a raw umber that tilts or leans a little bit more towards yellow. And so it would belong about right here. Both of those raw umbers will belong in this area of the saturation on the wheel. Now, as I move around the wheel, I have two more colors that I have alizarin crimson or alizarin permanent. Now, alizarin crimson has gotten a bad rap. The color's been in the artist palette for centuries and centuries, and artists love it. But it was discovered to be a little bit unstable in different kind of lighting situations, and so companies have begun to replace alizarin crimson with alizarin permanent. Most companies, it's almost identical. Where does alizarin belong? And this is another funny color out of the tube. Let's get the test strips back. Now here's my alizarin. And if I put, again, it's a very transparent color. It comes out of the tube very, very dark. It's a very, very transparent color. But when I allow just the hue of the color to come through, it belongs in red on the wheel, but it belongs just a little bit towards red violet. Can you see that? You see, it's red, but it's just a little bit, then leans just a little bit towards red violet. It's not quite fully saturated, but it's very close to fully saturated. So what we can do there to plot alizarin crimson, we'll plot alizarin crimson in the red, but what I'm going to do, let's just pull that on the brush here and get it into the brush really, really good. I want to get that on there thinly. I'm not going to plot it right in the center of my line because it doesn't register exactly red, but I'm going to pull it just a little bit towards red violet. And you can see when I put it on the when I put it on the wheel, you can see there. And I'm going to actually, I wish I had carried that down just a little bit. I think it's probably close enough to full saturation. It's slightly desaturated, but you see it's this is alizarin permanent is more tends to be more desaturated, more saturated, has a stronger hue in it, more hue in it than alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson I would need to sort of plot about right here. So that would be alizarin. Now, if I wanted a pure red, talking about the mixtures, if I wanted a pure red, I can pull, let's see, there's my list. I can pull a little bit of red orange, cadmium red light, red orange, into the alizarin, and look what happens. See, there we go, right there. So there is a mixture that would belong right here. There's just enough with the red orange, there's just enough yellow in there in the red orange that but there's more red than yellow in red orange is what I'm trying to say. And so it mixes very well with the alizarin permanent to become a strong red as red goes. All right, so the next color I'm going to include is my quinacridone violet. Let's pull this over here. Here's quinacridone violet again. My quinacridone violet is a red violet. And it's quinacridone violet, well, not all the quinacridones, The quinacridone violet is a very transparent color. So let's show you what quinacridone violet looks like, and then we'll look at where it would plot on the wheel. So I'll pull the test strip, and here's my red violet on the palette. And let's pull that down. Again, I want to, it's a very strong, very, very, very strong tinting strength. And you can tell that when I put it on the test strip. You can see how very, very strong the tinting strength is. That simply means that it won't require as much to mix it. So the tinting strength always plays into these too. But it's a red violet, but it doesn't belong right on red violet. It belongs a little bit to the right of red violet on the wheel. You see right here. Cross it just a little bit. Now, the red-orange, remember, is a tertiary, so this red-orange could have a little bit more orange in it and still be red-orange. Red-orange could have just a little bit more red in it and still be red-orange, but red is red. Red-violet, the same thing. The tertiaries are all like this. Tertiary probably could have just a little bit more of the red in it and still be red-violet. And it could have just a little bit more of the violet in it come this way and still be red-violet. But I'm plotting it right here. So if I were to be referring to that for doing painting, I would know that if this is not quite full red-violet. So if I needed to desaturate it, I'll talk about that in the next quick tip when we're looking at the cool colors. But when I need to desaturate that, I can't just grab just any yellow green. I need to have a yellow green that leans a little bit more towards green because this has more red in it and more green will help neutralize the red. So this is the section of my warm colors. Now see, I only have on my palette, I only have two colors that are not fully saturated. And that's because over the years I've tried to come up with a palette with the fewest number of tubes to give me the most, the widest or broadest range of colors of all saturations. So in the next quick tip now, we'll go through the cool colors, the colors on this side, and show you how those get platted on the wheel. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.